When this annoyed stepmother left her paralyzed daughter in the forest, she thought her husband would understand her reasons and agree with her. The girl was left all alone in a dangerous environment, but then a wild wolf spotted her and did something she would have never expected. Victor and Olga couldn't believe their eyes when they saw the luggage in front of their door. It belonged to her granddaughter, but she was nowhere in sight. They were instantly worried. Not only were they out in the forest with all the many dangers it held, but their granddaughter Mila was a city girl. She wasn't safe. And even worse, she was in a wheelchair. What could have happened to her? They had been out for the day and had no idea that the girl was coming. Where could she be? They had to find her, so they rushed out to follow her wheelchair tracks. But then, they heard the sound of a wolf growling, and the blood froze in their veins. Mila could be in massive danger. The couple had been through a lot of very challenging things in their life, but they couldn't imagine anything happening to their favorite person in the place they loved most. It would be simply devastating. As they ran through the forest looking for her, their steps never faltered once. After all, they knew this place like the back of their hands. They had lived here for decades, and every stone, every branch, every leaf was forever etched in their memory. As a young married couple, Victor and Olga couldn't wait to start their life on their land in the forest. It was close enough to a small village that they weren't completely cut off, but still offered them the freedom and independence they craved for their blossoming family. They wanted to have loads of children, and they were overjoyed when they had their baby boy. But sadly, things went wrong with the birth, and the doctors told them they wouldn't ever have to have more children. The news devastated Olga, but Victor was happy with the family they had built. His wife and son were all he needed. But for his son, their world wasn't enough. He hated living on the farm, and with only a small village for entertainment. Victor tried to teach him all he knew, but he wasn't interested. He hated living in the forest and in the wild. As soon as he was old enough, he went to college in the city, and once he found a job there, he never really came home again. For a long time, they didn't see much of him. The city was only an hour away, but it was like another world. They wanted their son to follow his dreams, but they hoped that he would have at least some small spot for them in his life. Olga missed her boy terribly, but when it became clear that he didn't reciprocate the sentiment, she started pouring all her love on the small wild animals that ended up on her front porch. She had always loved looking after animals, and during this sad time, she rescued even more. Victor patiently made her little splints for birds' wings or small enclosures she could keep the animals in. She was filling the void her son had left by helping creatures that were all alone, just like she felt. Then, suddenly, their son called and said that he wanted to come for a visit. That day, he brought a surprise with him, his future wife. Victor and Olga loved her as soon as they saw her. She was sweet and caring, and they knew that their son would be in good hands. However, she too was a city girl and completely uninterested in farm life. It was a little sad that they had no one to take over the farm one day, but they just wanted their son to be happy. For a while, it was like having their son back. He had looked down on their way of life for so long that it felt like losing him. But now, he came to visit often with his wife, and they had holidays together on the farm. The couple felt like they had a daughter too. Their hearts and their family was expanding. And it was on one of those holiday celebrations that they were given the best gift ever. Their son and daughter-in-law brought their baby granddaughter Mila to meet her grandparents for the first time. Olga and Victor couldn't believe how lucky they were. They had everything they had ever dreamt of. And as Mila grew, she brought even more joy to all the adults in her life. Her mother wanted to make sure she had plenty of time to know her grandparents. They were the only pair she had, and she wanted them to have a great relationship, so she brought her daughter to visit them often. Sometimes she even came on her own with her daughter when their son was working. Mila was a great kid who loved the farm and the animals. When she was a bit older, she was even allowed to come visit on her own for the very first time. And that's when she learned what a secret was. Mila and her grandparents had gone for a walk in the woods when, suddenly, they had come upon a sad sight. There was a shallow wolf den, but they didn't have to fear the wolves inside. There were 3 puppies inside of it, but only one of them was alive. It looked like the mama wolf had met with some sort of accident, or she would have never left her puppies to starve. She seemed to have gone out one day and never returned, and Victor knew a wolf mom would never do that. It was a heartbreaking sight, and Mila was very sad. But Olga was determined that they would save the third pup, so they picked him up and took him home. They knew their son would be worried sick if he knew his daughter was hanging around a wolf, regardless of his size and age, so they made little Mila promise this would be their secret. It looked like Victor was going to be building a wolf bed this time. He also went to search for the mother wolf in case she was just in trouble somewhere and could still be helped, but they never found her. All they could do now was to care for the pup. As expected, Mila and the little wolf quickly bonded. She loved feeding him, and despite her grandparents warning her that he was a wild animal that deserved to be free one day, she still adored him. And the feeling was mutual. He was always following her wherever she went. It was almost like having a dog pup, but not quite. He grew quickly and soon started displaying his predatory instincts. But Mila wasn't afraid. She helped her grandparents care for him and later taught him how to hunt and search for things. Over the years, she kept visiting, and even when he was eventually living with a pack in the wild, he always seemed to come around when she was there. At first, he would come to play, and then, eventually, he would just hide in the bush and leave when he saw Mila. The next summer, the whole family came for a visit, and they had exciting news. Mila was going to be a big sister. Her mom was expecting another baby. They were all so excited. It would be with another bundle of joy who had joined their pack. Olga had started knitting a new blanket for the baby when they suddenly got devastating news. Their son phoned, and they knew something was very wrong just from his voice. There had been a terrible accident. Mila and her mom were driving home from shopping for the new baby when someone hit them. They rolled down an embankment and they were trapped in the car for a while. Their daughter-in-law and the baby she was carrying did not make it out of the car. Mila was finally rescued, but she was in bad shape. As scared as they were to go to the city, they knew some things are more important than fear. So, Victor and Olga packed their bags and took the train to the city. The trip was worth it when their son broke down in their arms. He was glad they came. Mila looked so small and weak against the white hospital bed. When she opened her eyes, she smiled to see them. But then, reality hit and shadows clouded their sweet girl's eyes. She didn't want to talk about the accident or about her mom, who stopped speaking while they were still trapped in the car. She was badly traumatized. And, worst of all, she was also paralyzed. She did have terrible injuries, but after a while, she should have been up and walking again. The doctors believed that the trauma she had been through was causing the paralysis. If she was in a better space mentally, perhaps she might be able to walk again. But it looked like this better space was far out of her reach. After the funeral, Olga and Victor stayed as long as they could, but they couldn't leave the farm forever. Their friends were looking after things, but after a month, they had to leave. Mila begged them to take her with them, but their son didn't want that. He needed his daughter for comfort. He wasn't thinking about her healing or how much she loved the farm, and instead was only focused on his own pain. It didn't matter how much they tried to reason or how much Mila begged. She was staying at home. He was angry that they didn't back him up, and for months after that, he refused to let her come and see them. He even made up excuses if they wanted to visit him. And a year after the accident, he just let them know that he was married again. The news came as a big shock to the parents. They didn't know he was even interested in anyone and couldn't help but wonder how Mila was taking it. Was the girl ready for another woman in her mother's place? Their son wouldn't even let them speak to her. He said that he needed to adapt, but she still wasn't walking. It broke their hearts not to be able to be there for her when she needed it most. But there was nothing they could do. But things took an even more drastic turn a few months later. Victor and Olga spent the entire day running errands and didn't see the shocking events that unfolded at their farm. Mila's stepmother was tired of having a girl in her house that was always sad. She didn't have to look after her, but she was tired of being held back by a girl in a wheelchair. This was not what she had envisioned when she had married a wealthy man with a grown child. She thought she would spend her days shopping and maybe playing the role of the fun stepmother, but that girl didn't have a fun bone in her body and was also a hassle to drag around stores. She simply wanted her gone. After another screaming match, Mila told her that if she took her to her grandparents' farm, she would never have to see her again. The horrid woman thought that that was a brilliant plan, and since her husband was away on a work trip, it was the perfect time to act. He would understand when he got back. She packed all Mila's stuff and loaded her up that same day. Then they drove in the direction of the forest. There was no one at the farm, but the stepmom didn't care. She wasn't taking Mila home with her again. She got the girl and all her belongings out of the car and just left, not caring 1 ounce about Mila's safety. For all they knew, her grandparents could have been away for an extended period, but the stepmom left her paralyzed daughter all alone in the forest. What she also didn't know was that a wolf had noticed her and was about to do something surprising. Mila didn't care that her stepmom wanted to get rid of her. It meant that she was finally here in the farm where she truly wanted to be. She decided that she would go and sit in the quiet forest while she waited for her grandparents. She took the familiar path to the stream with her wheelchair. The only problem was that its wheels were made for the city streets and homes and not for the forest ground. She got stuck almost right away, and it took all her strength to get the wheels going again. She was getting tired and hadn't even gone halfway, but at least the next part was downhill. But then she started going faster, and she couldn't stop herself. The chair hit a rock at the bottom, and she took a tumble falling out of it. There she was, hurt and unable to reach her chair. Then she suddenly heard noises of branches breaking, and then a bear came out of the forest. She was terrified. The bear sniffed in the air and started walking closer to her. Mila was sure she looked like the easiest prey it could ever stumble upon. She struggled to keep still, her heart beating like a drum in her chest. Then, out of nowhere, a wolf jumped between them and growled. Its pack came out from the forest too, and the bear quickly realized this was a fight it would lose. When she saw the bear flee the scene, Mila allowed herself a sigh of relief. But then she noticed the rest of the pack approaching her and understood that she was still in grave danger. However, the first wolf growled loudly at the pack, and they stopped in their tracks. What was going on? She wondered. Why did this wolf seem so keen on keeping her safe? But that's when she noticed an odd detail. This wolf looked strangely familiar. She was sure she'd already seen those amber eyes, but could this really be the pup she had raised when she was still a child? It didn't take her long for her to be certain of it. The wolf nuzzled his head against her bruised body, and his tail wagged as she ran her fingers through his fur. This truly was her friend. He knew her and had come to her aid when she most needed it. But she didn't just need help because of the bear. She was heartbroken, and so far, no one had managed to shatter the wall she'd hid herself behind after the loss of her mother. Did he know how deep her pain went? She would never know. But for some reason, his gentle kindness broke down that wall, and suddenly, she was sobbing. For the first time since she lost her mother and her future sibling, she could cry her heart out. She had been in so much shock and denial that she hadn't been able to shed a tear. But holding on to this massive wild wolf, she met his coat with her tears. In the meantime, Victor and Olga got home, realized that Mila was supposed to be there, and started searching. And that was how they found her, holding onto a wolf and crying. The pack left as soon as they heard the people approach, and even their wolf moved back to look on from a distance. It was like he was making sure the grandparents had this before he left. Mila looked up at them and realized she needed their loving embrace too. So, she got up and walked to them. Only when they gasped in shock did she realize she was walking again. Her grandparents held her close as they all cried, and they went back to their cabin. She was exactly where she needed to be. Around a week later, her father suddenly showed up. His parents were furious with him. He had been a horrible father when his daughter needed him, but he already knew that. He also knew that he had gotten married way too quickly. And when he heard what his new wife had done to his daughter, he had asked her to leave. He was shocked to see Mila walking, and that made his guilt for keeping her away even deeper. She refused to leave, and they all expected him to put up a fight again. But they were shocked by what he said. He was willing to move back to the farm to be with his daughter and parents. He could see that his child needed it, and, to be honest, life in the city had become too painful for him too. He had finally realized that some things are more important than work. Luckily, he had a loving family that was willing to wait until he found it out for himself and would welcome him back as soon as he was ready. They would watch over him and Mila and slowly mend the pain in their hearts with love. And, somewhere in the forest, they knew that they had a wolf that was looking out for them too. What a beautiful story! How would you react if you found out your significant other shipped your child away? Have you ever broken down in sobs after an odd event triggered your emotions? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.